many, many years in Wayne County. She's a practicing attorney, and she's the person responsible for the same-sex marriage. She took it when nobody else would, and she kind of got caught up in it. And she took it all the way to the Supreme Court. So
Thanks, Carol. I have to say that after spending yesterday touring multiple cities up in the 1st district, does everybody know where the 1st district is? It's so far. It feels great to be back home today. I love the 1st district, by the way. I met some incredible people, but it feels good to be back here. Fair warning, I am campaigning a little bit sick. I think it's just part of the job, I guess. I'm trying really hard not to have a George Bush the First in Japan moment. Although I will say, in retrospect, for the presidency, that might have been the most dignified we've ever seen the presidency. At this point, I would take that moment after just about, over just about every day that we see now from our current president. But that being the case, I attended the University of Michigan for undergrad. I went to Wayne State Law for law school, or the Harvard of Detroit, as I would refer to it. It is, thank you, Wayne Law alumni here. I live in Plymouth with my wife and our 2 kids, our 14-year-old twins who are in the Plymouth Canton Community Schools. Not the same school, for some reason. They're in different high schools because they were twins and couldn't possibly be in the same school. God forbid they got taken for one another. But anyway, so I am a proud resident of the 11th District. I have spent my career, I have spent my life trying to defend the little guy. I have never once in my entire career represented a corporation, anything with a PC or LLC or INC after it. I don't represent corporations. I represent people. I have represented thousands and thousands of crime victims, personally. So I know what it's like to have to hold a child by the hand and escort her up to the witness stand when she had to testify against her father, who had been brutally, savagely raping her for years. I also know what it's like to have a heart-to-heart with the parents of a murder victim and ask them if they really wanted to stay in the courtroom or not, while you presented pictures on a screen of their son's skull and brain matter. So I know what that's like. But on the other hand, I also know what it's like to practice representing indigent defendants. So I know what it's like when you have clients who are poor and who could not otherwise afford an attorney, but are in a situation where they have been accused of a crime that they didn't commit and feel very hopeless and need somebody to champion for them and fight for them. I know what it's like to represent people who, through no fault of their own, end up in the criminal justice system. Whether they are veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or whether they are mentally ill people who could not receive the proper medication or treatment because we just don't provide it in this state. We'd rather throw people into jail or prison and throw away the key than give them the help they deserve and that they require. I know what it's like to represent victims of the opioid epidemic who, through no fault of their own, became addicted to prescription medication that was prescribed by a doctor, and to have to drive them around from place to place to place looking for the best treatment for them so that they didn't end up in jail or prison or worse, dead. So I know what it's like to do all those things. I also know what it's like to have somebody come to my office and say, help me, I've been discriminated against. I am a minority and I have been fired from my job. I've been kicked out of my apartment. I've been denied the right to have rights to my own children or to the person I love. And I don't have anyone to help me. And so I know what it's like to have someone beg and plead for someone to represent them when they were in their worst hour of need. And I've done that. I've spent my career doing that. I know what it's like to have people who have been victims, terrible victims of hate crimes, and to have the police not take them seriously, and to have law enforcement do nothing to assist them in terms of solving their crime, prosecuting their crime, convicting the person that hurt them. And that's why I formed the Fair Michigan Justice Project, which right now, today, is in the middle of arraigning 2 defendants in Detroit who took a gun and tried to shoot and kill and multiple gunshot wounds to a trans woman who was doing nothing but walking down the street. Did you see that case on the news? That's my case. That's our case from the Fair Michigan Justice Project. And I'm very proud to be involved in those type of innovative projects to bring justice to people who otherwise would not be afforded it. So I have been involved in many different areas of the justice system, but all of them in which I made every effort to try to protect people who had no other forms of protection. There are so many things that I want to do with this office. This office has fallen so far from the time that Frank Kelly was there. It's absolutely terrifying and horrifying to see how this office has been utilized, an office that is supposed to be used to protect the residents of this state, and yet instead has been used to persecute our state residents time and time and time again, and to protect bad state actors, and to protect bad corporate actors. No more. What are the things that I want to do as Attorney General? Well, one of the things I want to do is to restore voting rights. Under the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, we can actually file suit as the Attorney General to ensure that we don't have the dilution of minority populations so that they are fairly and adequately represented. We haven't had an AG do anything like that, but we can. We can, and I will do that. I want to protect workers. We have companies all over the state that are violating basic labor laws, but because we have an AG that has been bought and paid for by big corporations, they have not been enforced. I want to go back to a time when we enforce those laws and we protect workers and we protect unions. I want to make certain that we have a conviction integrity unit in the office so that we can go around the state and we have complaints, legitimate complaints of people who have been wrongfully convicted. We can reopen those cases and re-examine those cases and explore those cases further and make certain that we don't have people who are languishing in our prisons for years, for decades, for life sentences, who are there and who are actually innocent, and we know this happens. And we ought to have a state actor who is involved in making certain that these people are exonerated when it's proper for them to be exonerated. I want to have a hate crimes unit in the office. I want to make certain that just like I've done with the Fair Michigan Justice Project, we have a state office that is ensuring the protection of our minority communities. We know that we have 28 hate groups in this state, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we can use RICO laws to go after them, just like in the South. We can use RICO laws to go after them and to destroy them before they hurt good people. I want to make sure that we have an auto insurance fraud unit so that we are exploring fraud in the auto insurance industry. We have the highest rates anywhere in the nation. And we know that there's fraud on both sides, right? On the plaintiff side, and lots of fraud on behalf of the insurance companies. I suspect, frankly, collusion on behalf of the insurance companies. Why do we have an AG that's willing to explore that and to look into it and have depositions and interrogatories and subpoenas and find out why are our rates so high? Do they really need to be? How can we better protect Michigan residents? I want to protect the environment. I want to also shut down Line 5. Priority 1, day 1, minute 1 that I am in office. I'm going to file that claim. You can do it electronically. Literally, 12 o'clock, sworn into office, 12:01, file for injunctive relief to shut down Line 5. But not just Line 5. We need to be doing all kinds of things to protect the environment. And I don't care if it's the Wolverine Tannery over in Grand Rapids, in that area, or if it's the incinerator in Midtown, or the 48217 area code in Downriver in southwest Detroit. You know, one of my first cases at the prosecutor's office involved a serial killer by the name of Benjamin Atkins. Does anybody here remember the Highland Park serial killer, or the Woodward Corridor serial killer? They couldn't seem to settle on a good name for the serial killer. But at the time, he was the fastest moving serial killer in American history. He had killed 11 women by raping them, sodomizing them, asphyxiating them to death. And of course, that case ultimately was taken very seriously. They put together a task force, state police, sheriff's department, Highland Park and Detroit police departments, because 11 people had died and they needed to get to the bottom of it. But I look at all of those environmental crimes that are being committed by all the places that I just discussed, in places all over the state, and when you have 11 people who have died because they have kidney disease or liver disease or lung cancer or other respiratory diseases that cause people to die, we don't do a goddamn thing. We don't do anything about it. We have serial killers walking amongst us and we do nothing. And I have a message for the Republicans in the state, and I have a message for Bill Schuette. If you're tough on crime, that means being tough on environmental crimes as well. Polluting the environment is a crime. And we need to start taking that seriously because more people are suffering from that than any serial killer that's ever been on the loose in any state in this country. We need to work on consumer protection. We need to, again, make it the strongest consumer protection unit in the nation. We need to go after predatory lenders. We need to shut down payday loans. These are companies that prey on our communities, particularly our poor communities, our minority communities. Let's shut them down. What they're doing is illegal. We need to protect seniors. We need to make certain that nursing homes that have serious safety and health violations, that have serious issues when it comes to quality of care, that are literally killing our seniors due to abuse and neglect and economic exploitation, they need to have their licenses revoked. They need to be shut down. These were traditionally the provinces of the Office of Attorney General, but they don't do that anymore. We need to get back to a time when that's done, and we protect our state seniors. We need to protect a woman's right to birth control and a woman's right to a safe abortion in the event that that is necessary. And I will do everything in my power to make certain that we protect women's reproductive rights in this state. And if that means having to, first of all, close down all of these ridiculous pregnancy crisis centers that, in my opinion, are operating illegally, you take an oath to protect the residents of the state, and you take an oath to uphold the Michigan Constitution and the United States Constitution. And I will not defend, I will not use your state tax dollars to defend unconstitutional laws, and it's whether it has to do with these ridiculous adoption bills that allow state-funded adoption agencies to refuse to work with same-sex couples or refuse to work with people that don't subscribe to the particular brand of Christianity of those particular agencies. Maybe they're atheists, or they're Muslim, or they're Jewish, and they can literally turn them away at the door. I will not defend that. That's a case that's pending right now. The ACLU brought suit. Absolutely will not defend that. It is flagrantly unconstitutional. Or whether it's a case like mine, the DeBoer case. There were AGs all around the country, in California, in Pennsylvania, in Kentucky, who refused to defend that. They said, I will not use state tax dollars to defend a flagrantly unconstitutional law. I will not defend those sorts of laws. You know what? State House or State Senate or Governor's Office, have at it. Hire your own private attorney. I will not defend these types of laws. Time was that the people in the state legislature actually cared about that and would not go out of their way to pass laws that were unconstitutional. They don't do that anymore. So we need an AG that's willing to stand up to them. I will stand up to the Trump administration, and I will sue Donald Trump and his administration every chance that I get. That means all day, every day. That means 7 days a week, because on the PACER system, you can actually file cases on Saturdays and Sundays. So whether that's suing Betsy DeVos in the Department of Education, every time they fail to protect student loan borrowers or fail to protect disabled children, whether it means suing the Department of Health and Human Services when they fail to provide subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, or whether it's suing them when they fail to enforce the law that mandates that employers provide birth control to their employees, or whether it's suing Scott Pruitt and the EPA when he refuses to clean up Superfund sites, or, my God, I want to sue Jeff Sessions so bad. I want to sue him. I want to sue the Department of Justice for all their ridiculousness with their memorandums that ensure a license for federal employees to discriminate against people, or whether it involves the travel ban, incarnations 1, 2, or 3, or whether it involves mandates that transgender individuals cannot serve in our military, coming, of course, from a guy who had 5 deferments for bone spurs, to tell good Americans that they can't serve their country. It's absolutely ridiculous. I won't have it, and I will protect our state residents against overreaches of this ridiculous administration as long as it's in power. So those are some of the things that I want to do as Michigan Attorney General. I think we need an Attorney General that fights as hard and as tenaciously as possible on behalf of our state residents. And let me say this, when I first started running for office, people said to me, well, what if we have an all-female ticket? Can an all-female ticket win? And after last Tuesday, I'll say this, how can we win without an all-female ticket? I don't see how we can do it. And I heard, how can an openly gay person win state office? Well, I have news for you. LGBT candidates actually have a higher percentage of winning now than their straight counterparts. So I say we can do things in the state that we've never done before, and we can bring democracy back to our state, and we can bring these offices back to the people. And that's what I intend to do running for this office. Yes, sir.
I got a small business question. I'm a clinical social worker, and I also chair the law enforcement program at Open Community College. I noticed that the use of marijuana has been going on for about heavy-duty property since the beatnik. So all this question about how marijuana sold by small businesses has to be tested. It's been tested for 50, 60 years. And what's happening now, too, is the state is trying to shut down these small businesses.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously, in terms of small, you mean the dispensaries, right? Is when you say the small businesses? Okay, well, first of all, let me say this. It's not just that I will enforce the law if, the marijuana proposal makes the ballot, which I expect it to in 2018. I support the proposal. I am an advocate for legalization of recreational marijuana. Now, how do I come to that? Well, 25 years of both prosecuting and defending marijuana cases, and I will tell you this. First of all of the murder and mayhem and gang warfare that I have come to see from marijuana occurs on the black market. I can't wait until we don't have a black market anymore, until we can tax this product and we can properly regulate this product. And I can't wait until we are no longer throwing people in jail and prison for marijuana. And I will... And I will say, as somebody who, right now, still involved in the criminal justice system, I can't believe that sometimes I have to wait months and months and months to get DNA testing back on homicide cases because our state is spending hundreds of millions of dollars in testing and in investigating and prosecuting ridiculous marijuana cases. And at a time right now where the opioid epidemic is raging throughout the state and throughout this country, I can't believe that we can still afford to spend so much time and money and energy concentrating on marijuana crimes. And let me say this right now in response to something that was asked earlier. I believe from a physiological standpoint, you cannot overdose on marijuana. I'm not acting as a proponent of marijuana. I'm just saying when you compare it to opioids, it's a very, very different issue. So in terms of the dispensaries, my concern right now is that there are people who need their medicine and they cannot get their medicine. And going up in the first, by the way, I had person after person, almost entirely the senior population, who relies on medical marijuana as their form of medicine for a variety of ailments, very painful ailments that they only find relief through medical marijuana, except for all the dispensaries have been closed down. And you go county after county after county, and you can't find it anywhere. And I think it's a travesty, and it's wrong, and we're hurting people, and we're protecting no one by doing that. So I want to make certain, again, that it's legalized. I I want to make sure it's properly taxed, that money goes to our roads and our schools, and to help veterans that are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is part of the current proposal that we'll likely be voting on next year. And I want to make certain that it's regulated properly, just like alcohol. And that's what I think we need to do. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I had asked a question at the end of Mr. Miles' presentation concerning medical marijuana. Currently, they don't have a method by which they can determine the ability to operate a motor vehicle. So if you're determined to have any level of marijuana in your system, you're faced with being charged with operating while under the influence. And there hasn't been any showing at what nanogram level your ability to operate a vehicle is influenced. So how, as Attorney General, would you deal with that issue?
Well, Seymour, that's a huge issue, and I see it all the time in my practice, because you have people who, sure, they've been using marijuana at some point, oftentimes legally with a medical marijuana card, treating an ailment, and maybe they were using it a day ago, or 2 days ago, or a week ago. And so, I mean, the name of the law is operating under the influence of drugs. So you have to actually be under the influence. It doesn't mean, did you ever use this drug in your life, or is there residue somewhere in your body that would indicate that at some point you used it? So what we need to do is, I think that necessity is the mother of invention, right? Did I get that right, that phrase? And we have laboratories all around the country right now that are working on that. And they are devising new and innovative techniques to test, to make certain that if we are going to arrest people, even if it's just overnight, and issue them a citation and make them come to court, and where the state or the municipality is attempting to offer up proof that they were driving under the influence, that we know that they were actually under the influence at the time they were driving, and not the day before, or the week before, or a month earlier even. So I think we need to work with laboratories around the state to do everything we possibly can. This, by the way, is why it's so important that this not be a Schedule I drug anymore, because that will assist us in terms of greater testing, but we have to find the best possible method, and I know in other states, in Washington and Colorado, they're working on this right now, to find the best way we can to test to make certain that for drugged drivers, we don't want drug drivers, right? We absolutely want to prevent that, but we want to make certain that people we arrest and the people we prosecute actually were under the influence at the time. So I want to work as hard as I can with agencies, not just across the state, across the country, to find the best testing available, and that scientists can agree is the best testing, and make certain that I do everything to push that with the state legislature so that we can put laws in place as quickly as possible to utilize the new innovative forms of testing and to use that as our methodology, so that instead of a data master, which is what we use when we charge somebody with operating under the influence of liquor or alcohol, that we have done something very similar to that that is reliable, scientifically reliable, so that it can be admissible in a court of law.
Well, people on who get caught with marijuana don't speed, so there's no speeding. No, it wasn't a question. It's a statement.
We just want to keep the questions, because
Yeah.
they have other places to
We're
go
also,
with that.
we're also probably at time. Maybe I don't want to get an answer literally right now, but I would like to put the question to both you and Mr. Miles. And it has to do with a couple of aspects of criminal justice reform that are percolating and that need to be addressed in the state. The first one is civil asset forfeiture. It is something that there was some inching of positive movement in that direction in the state and across the country, and then that was slammed by slammed door and after Jeff Sessions, who is now openly encouraging the seizure of assets from people who have not even been tried, let alone convicted. And then the other part of it is the rampant use of cash bail for as an across the board thing, which totally completely basically puts puts people in jail for extended periods of time for something that is meant to be simply ensuring their appearance in court.
So, I've defended many cases involving civil asset forfeiture. I have another name for civil asset forfeiture. I call it robbery by the state. And these are cases where you don't have to be charged with a crime, you don't have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, or guilty beyond any standard of doubt, because you don't even have to be charged. And I think it's absolutely awful. And I have seen person after person after person who have literally done nothing wrong at all whatsoever, and nor are there any allegations that they have, by the way. And yet the state entity or the municipal entity gets to go in and gets to literally take their stuff, gets to come into their house and to take their TV, to take all of their cash, to take their automobiles, to take everything they own, and never even has to accuse them of a crime. And it's absolutely horrible, and I think it's a practice that we ought to encourage to end, and to end as quickly as possible. And when it comes to cash bail bond, I have to say that I have seen so many people sitting in jail, rotting in jail, as they're awaiting disposition of their case, sometimes the most ridiculous and minor cases you've ever seen. And they are sitting there languishing in jail for one reason and one reason only, and that's because they're poor. And if they were a person of any means, they wouldn't be sitting in jail. And it's awful, and it's ridiculous. And the worst part is I see people all the time who are charged with incredibly minor offenses. It might be driving on a suspended license. Maybe they forgot to pay a traffic ticket, and so their license is suspended, and now they're sitting in jail. And in the meantime, they lose their job. They lose their job because maybe they can't make a $200 or a $500 bond. And the community's not any safer. We're not protecting the community, and we're really not even ensuring their reappearance at that point. And those are the only two things we're supposed to be looking at. And so I absolutely would encourage a major reevaluation of how we determine bond. There are people who are accused of first-degree murder or of first-degree criminal sexual conduct. Do those people probably need to have high bonds so that they stay locked up while they're awaiting their proceedings for the safety of the community? I would say so in most cases. But when you have these incredibly minor offenses that people stay locked up on, first of all, it's terrible for the taxpayers, right? And the other thing that maybe people don't know is that when we have people who are locked up on these minor offenses, at least when it comes to the county jails, we actually have to release people on other cases. There's only so many people that we can have in the county jail, in the Oakland County Jail, or the Wayne County Jail, or other jails outside of the 11th District. And so it's very important that we reevaluate that. And once we have a reevaluation, that we do everything to implement that throughout the state courts. So that's my feeling.
We have two more questions because she's so thorough.
I don't know if it was possible for Pat to address that previous question too at some point. I don't know, because
Yes.
we didn't ask him the same question.
Okay, sure. Well, there's no question that civil asset forfeiture has been abused by law enforcement, and it's incredibly overreaching on that too. So I agree that is something that needs to be brought back. And you're right, the Attorney General Sessions reversed the policies of the Obama administration that we're starting to really roll back on civil asset forfeiture, which was intended to be for large-scale drug trafficking organizations and to really put a dent in them. And now it's being used to hurt citizens, individuals more so. And same on the cash bond or cash bail. That is, it's punishing people who don't have the financial wherewithal and that they're sitting in jail. So I agree, those are two very big problems, and we need to make progress again on criminal justice reform. That's why, again, elections matter. And 2016, with the election of Donald Trump, who could put Jeff Sessions in office as Attorney General, is something that we really need to keep fighting against, and we need to fight it in 2018. So, thank you.
If I may, thank you. Dana, I'm an attorney of some 50 years almost, and I was in the insurance industry for a while. The No-Fault Act and what the legislature and the Attorney General has done with regard to the rampant fraud. I've been on both sides. I was a defense attorney for an insurance company as well as a clinic attorney for individuals. I've seen so much abuse on both sides of the case of people who are trying to afford their insurances, get their insurances to pay, and have been slammed by what I think are, if not fraudulent, but probably illegal practices of the insurance industry. I kind of echo some of your feelings about the collusion between insurance companies, but I also see an awful lot of abuse from the Trial Attorneys Association members, the attorneys who go out there and chase down doctors or doctors chase down attorneys. There's a lot that can be done in this state that probably has the greatest medical insurance for people in the country if it's applied correctly. What do you intend to do about enforcing or going after the rampant fraud, getting the Attorney Grievance Commission, as well as the medical end of it, the medical associations, as well as the insurance companies, to toe the line and stop, because that will reduce the cost. They don't have to reduce the premium. They can reduce the premium.
Okay, I hope it'll reduce the cost. Now, first of all, as I indicated earlier, I do want to open an auto insurance fraud unit at the office. And there are no less than 15 offices around the country, AG's offices, that have such departments and divisions. And I think it's nowhere is it more important in Michigan than we have that. And again, you're right, there is fraud, there is abuse on both sides, and it needs to be investigated. And yes, when we see bad actors involved, they need to be prosecuted. They need to be, if they're attorneys, they do need to be referred to the Attorney Grievance Commission for ethical violations. There's no doubt about that. I will say this though. I have seen, for instance, that, certainly I'm not saying we need to only blame the insurance industry, but I think that so much fault really does lie with them. And we don't do a good enough job in expecting how they come about deciding what their premiums are. And I'm going to give you a good example of this, is tort reform as that pertains to medical malpractice. There were because the state legislature is bought and paid for by the insurance industry, and because our appellate courts, the Court of Appeals, Michigan Supreme Court, also bought and paid for by the insurance industry, we saw the most massive tort reform that any state has ever seen over the course of the last 25 years. And nowhere was this more apparent than in medical malpractice. So they made it so hard to sue on a medical malpractice claim, it was virtually impossible to get into court. Virtually impossible. So, let me ask you this. Did the premiums for the doctors practicing medicine go down as a result?
No.
No! No! So we cut down on all the fraud, but we didn't do anything to monitor the insurance companies to make certain that they could only make a certain profit. Now in auto insurance it's even worse because of the fact that in order to drive in the state, you have to have auto insurance. It's a crime. Those people who I was talking about who go to jail because they are arrested on minor infractions, do you know how many of them are there because they can't provide proof of insurance because they can't afford insurance? So they go to jail for it. Because you have to legally have insurance, you can't drive, and unfortunately it's not like we have the best mass transit here in Michigan so that you can get around otherwise, right? So somebody needs to really be inspecting the insurance companies and finding out how is it they're allowed to keep their rates so high? How do they come about deciding what their rates are in terms of catastrophic claims? Who's looking into that to see how much money is in there? I mean, we don't know the answers to these questions, but as AG, I can tell you this, I'm going to find out.